course, we're going to shift gears a little bit and move into the last big topic of the semester. And that is, I want to talk to you about jQuery. So jQuery is a JavaScript framework. Now, you know that when we were working with Python, we started out from a really basic Python, just creating some variables and learning about control structures and learning about methods and so on and so forth. And we built up to building our first very primitive web application. And then we went on from there to introduce the idea of a Flask framework eventually, which is a really wonderful framework that you can use to build and manipulate web applications. Well, in JavaScript, we've been working with very basic JavaScript primitives that allow us to work with the document object model and work with variables and work with methods and work with prototypes and so on and so forth. Now, you can build really interesting web applications just with that, but you can build much more powerful web applications and you can build them much more easily using something called the jQuery framework. So just like Flask, the jQuery framework is an example of one of the many powerful frameworks that are available when you want to work with JavaScript. And there's kind of a religious war over which framework is the best. But I don't think that anyone would argue that jQuery is a pretty good framework, although there are other ones out there. So the principal thing that jQuery lets you do, the main idea of jQuery, is it lets you manipulate the document object model in a very easy fashion. And you can do some really powerful, cool user interface effects as well without a lot of effort. And so I want to show you a first hello world kind of program that uses jQuery. And I'll use this to explain a whole bunch of things that you need to know in order to get jQuery up and running. So first of all, let's just start out with the HTML, okay? So the HTML, at least in the beginning, looks a lot like a regular HTML document. Let me just zoom in here a little bit. All right, so doc type, HTML. We're going to put in a head here. We'll put in a title. Hello world jQuery. Now there's some other stuff I'm going to add here in a little bit, but for now I'm just going to leave the head like that. All right, and now I'm just going to create a real basic HTML document. So here's a paragraph. Here is a list of things to do. All right, LI, work on web programming. That's one important thing you have to do. Work on discrete math 2. And LI, work. All right, so there's a lot of work that you have to do here as a sophomore computer science major. You've got three other courses other than web programming and discrete math 2, but you know that these 2 courses are a lot of work. All right, so I'm gonna, whoops, I forgot to put the body in here, so let's get that in. And let's see, I'm gonna try and indent all this at once. Yay. All right. And close the HTML. All right, so let's take a look at this. We'll save it. And we'll bring it up in the web browser. Okay, so here is a list of things to do, and we've got a bunch of things in the list. All right, now wouldn't it be amazing if with the press of a button, you could make all those things that you have to do disappear, and maybe disappear for real? Okay, well, you can't make it disappear for real, but at least we can make it disappear. So we're going to use a jQuery piece of UI sugar to make this work disappear. So to do that, to start out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, let's see, where's my other, oh, I guess I'm going to have to edit this again. So open with Xcode. Okay, I'm going to add this, add to this a button. Actually, two buttons. So the first button here is input type equals submit, value equals hide, and ID equals hide. Okay, whoops, hide. All right, and that's going to close that submit button. And I'll put a second one here. Input type equals a second submit, submit, and value equals show, and ID equals show. Okay, now the first thing I want you to notice is this is a little weird. I've got two buttons that are submit buttons. They're one after the other, and they don't appear in a form. But when we're working with jQuery, it is so easy to access and manipulate the document object elements, and we don't have to have these submit buttons in a form. We can just find out that they're there and process events that occur on those buttons without those buttons having to be in a form. The event that we're going to process is the on-click event. So if you click on either one of these submit buttons, we're going to do something interesting. All right, so that's the first thing. So let's save this. And let's take a look at what happens when we refresh this. Okay, so we've got two buttons now, hide, click, 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 and show, click, click, click. Okay, so what we like to do is set up an event handler for that. Now, before I get into the event handler, there's some things that we have to do to the HTML. So the first thing that we have to do, is we have to add a link to the JavaScript file that we're going to work with. All right. So we're going to put a script link in here. Script source equals, and we're going to say hello world.js. That's where all our JavaScript's going to go. And we'll close the script. All right, so that's important. But there's some other special stuff that we have to do here. And this is what you really need to pay attention to. In order to use the framework, we have to include some JavaScript and some CSS that allows us to work with the jQuery framework. So you know there were in Python, there was a whole bunch of import statements and stuff like that that we needed to get the Python code to work with the Flask framework that we wanted to work with. Well, in JavaScript, we're going to need something very similar. And what that is so difficult to type by hand that I don't even want to bother typing it by hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to ask Google, I'm going to say Google hosted libraries. So I just Googled that, and there's a nice link here that is called the Google hosted libraries link. So I'm going to click on that. And this is a list of all of the libraries that the JavaScript libraries that are really popular and fun to use that work with Google. All right. And if you notice over here on the right, there's a bunch of jQueries. There's jQuery, jQuery Mobile, jQuery UI. Well, what we're interested in is jQuery, first of all. And when I clicked on that jQuery link, it brought me to a bunch of different jQuery hosted libraries. All right. And this one, this link right here is the latest version of jQuery. And if you copy that script reference and you paste it into the HTML document that you're working on, you now have embedded the jQuery framework in your document. So yay, let's do that. But I also want to embed something called the jQuery UI, which I'll talk about later, but for now I just want to put it in here. So there's two separate snippets that need to be pulled in to use jQuery UI. The big picture idea of the jQuery UI is there's a whole bunch of really amazing CSS that you can wrap around lists and dialog boxes and text boxes and buttons that just makes your website look really cool without you having to write a lot of CSS to make your website look really cool. All right, so I just copied that stuff and I'm going to paste that in here as well. So I have a link to some CSS and I have a link to some JavaScript as well. This JavaScript is UI JavaScript, so it's different from the regular jQuery JavaScript. Is actually in addition to that jQuery JavaScript. Okay, so now I have a whole bunch of stuff that I just added to my hello-world.html file. None of it's really going to affect how things look at the moment because I'm not really exercising any cool jQuery UI functions or anything like that, UI stuff. But I am getting set up to execute the code in hello-world.js. And in order to do that, it's critical that I import this stuff. I don't recommend you trying to type this by hand. You should just go to the Google hosted libraries link and grab the stuff that you need there. Okay, so let's save this. And now let's go to hello-world.js and write the code to make this these JavaScript buttons work. So the way that jQuery works is really cool. So it has a slightly different syntax than, it's straight JavaScript syntax, but it's like a sort of condensed and useful form of JavaScript syntax. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say $open document, close paren, dot ready. All right, now let me explain what this is. This is a special, this $sign thing is something that jQuery has that allows you to quickly get access to different parts of the document object model. When you say $sign document, you're saying, I want to get access to the entire document object model. And this dot ready is an event handler. The event handler is a very special event handler. It is the event handler that says, when the document has been loaded in the browser, I want you to execute this code. Now you might think, well, that's really obvious. Of course I want to wait until the document is loaded to execute code. But if you do not put your jQuery code inside the document.ready event handler, you're going to get random behavior. Because any code that is jQuery code that is supposed to operate on the document object model, which is the HTML that comprises the document that's being loaded into your browser, must wait until the entire HTML document has been loaded. And there is no guarantee if any of your jQuery JavaScript code gets executed, there is no guarantee that that code will get executed after your document has been loaded unless you say, wait until the document's been loaded. It's very possible that the JavaScript, the jQuery JavaScript that you execute could get loaded before your document is loaded. If you take a look at the way I've set up hello-world.html, the script for my hello-world.js, my JavaScript gets loaded in the head part of the document before this HTML gets loaded. Now, I guess I could move that script down here, but I actually kind of like the way it's set up, because if you think about it, I'm just saying like, okay, all the weird stuff that's not real HTML, I'm gonna just put that in the head. Everything else that's just pure, beautiful HTML, I'm gonna keep down here. So I guess I could move that script down here to line 20, or maybe line 19. Whoops, I just noticed an error here. I'm gonna correct that. But if I do that, there's still no guarantee that although the HTML might be downloaded, it might not have been processed by the browser. And so the browser might decide to start executing code in hello-world.js before it's processed all of the HTML that's been loaded. Of course, this is a small HTML document, but if it was a really large HTML document, you could definitely see that the JavaScript might start getting executed before the HTML is processed. All right, so to guarantee that there aren't any weird timing dependencies or anything like that, what we're going to do is we're going to say, when the document is ready, we want to do this stuff. Now, you'll notice that when the document is ready, it takes an argument. The argument is the method that you would like to have executed when the document is ready. So we're effectively registering an event handler when we do this document.ready thing, okay? So I can't say document.ready, do some stuff. That's not how this document.ready thing works. But what you have to do is you have to say, when the document is ready, here is the method that I want you to execute. Now there's a bunch of ways that you can identify the method, but the easiest way to do this, the most common way to do this, is to do something called an anonymous function. So I'll show you how that works. In the beginning, I resisted anonymous functions, but now I'm sold on them. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just put a few blank lines here, and I'm going to put a semicolon here indicating, well, that's the end of the document ready. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, I wanna create an anonymous function, takes no arguments, and it starts here. And the anonymous function, which takes no arguments, ends here, okay? So just to repeat, what's happening here is we're saying, when the document is ready, I want you to execute this anonymous function, all right? All right, now the code in the anonymous function is just like the code that you'd have in a regular subroutine or regular method. And we're gonna have two pieces of code because I wanted to keep this simple as our first Hello World example. So the first piece of code registers an event handler that will get executed when you click on the hide button. So let's take a look at our HTML here, right? We have a hide button, boop, and we have a show button, boop. So I want something to get executed when the hide button gets executed, and I want something to get executed when the show button gets executed. All right, so using the jQuery UI, I can use that $ thing again. And this is like, the $ thing is this amazing tool that you can use to find an element in the document object model. And it has a very expressive way of finding stuff. So finding document, well, that's trivial. There's a special variable called document that jQuery has, so you can just find it. But you can also find by ID. So to find by ID, what you do is you say find pound. So if you remember back from our early days of using selectors to identify things in CSS, elements in CSS, one of the ways you can do one of the abilities that you can have for selectors to find something by ID. So if I say find pound, that's just like a CSS selector, and I'm going to say find pound hide. All right, so what that is saying is find me the element in the document object model that has the ID of hide, just like a CSS selector would work, right? So find pound hide dot click. So what this says is find the element hide, and I want to define the event handler for hide. And so the event handler for hide is going to repeat the pattern just like the event handler for ready. So we're going to say the event handler for click on hide is an anonymous function. And that anonymous function is going to do the following. All right, so we want some code in this anonymous function. The anonymous function is going to do the following. Find the element UL, any element UL, and I want to do the following effect. So this $UL effect, this is a cool ability that you get for free if you load jQuery and you load the jQuery UI. So the effect is going to be something called puff. So you'll see what puff does. It's pretty cool. All right, and then we're going to put a semicolon there. So we just registered an event handler, click, on the element that has the ID hide. We have an anonymous function that gets executed for that event handler, and the anonymous function executes the effect puff on UL. So let me just go back to the HTML and show you the scope of that the puff effect will have. So the scope of the puff effect will be on UL and any element below UL. So it'll be UL and all these list items. All right, that's what the scope of the effect puff will be. And actually, it would be on any unordered list that appears in the HTML document. Okay, so now let's do one more effect. So we're going to do, I'm just going to copy and paste this so we don't do a ton of typing. And I'm going to say, find the element show, the element that has the ID of show. The click event handler for that is going to execute this anonymous function, and I want it to execute across all UL elements, and the effect that I want to do is called the slow effect. All right. Well, that's it for our code for the JavaScript document. So the thing you should notice here is we have a lot of cool searching that's happening through this special dollar function. I can identify documents. I can identify single elements. I can identify a group of elements. And then I have a cool events or event handlers, the ready event handler and the click event handler. And then I have cool UI effects like this effect called puff and this effect called slow. All right, so that's saved. Let's try to execute the code to make this work. First, I'm going to reload. And now that should reload the JavaScript as well. Let's make sure, let me just save this again. Save. And let's go over to our HTML and save. Okay, and let's go over here and refresh. Okay, so if I click on the hide button, hopefully what will happen is the puff event will get executed, or the puff method will get executed on the unordered list and the list items in the unordered list. Boop. Nope. Boop. Okay, that didn't work. So let's see what happened. Let's go to Tools and Developer Tools. Okay, it says syntax error, unexpected number on line 9 of helloworld.js. Oh, it looks like I have a typo there, that number 3. So let's go back to helloworld.js. There is a 3 there. Go up here, File, Save, and let's go back here and refresh again. And let's go to console. Oops, looks like I still have another error. Oh, I still missed something. I forgot to say effect here. Okay, try saving that again. Go back here, go to console, reload. Much better. Okay, so I'm going to click on hide. Whoa, that was cool. Now I'll click on show. Uh-oh. Oh. So it says cannot read property mode of undefined. Oh, it's not effect. It's okay. Sorry. Lots of little gremlins, but I actually think this is helpful in debugging. So we're going to say show instead of effect. We're going to do a different user interface effect called show. Look closely at my notes here. Okay. And we'll go back here, refresh, start again. We're going to do hide. Yay. And then we're going to do show. Yay. Okay. So first of all, wouldn't it be nice if you could just make your work disappear by clicking on the hide button? Boop. And of course, reality is the work's still there. We have to get it done. All right. So this is an example, a very basic example of how to use jQuery. We're going to explore some more stuff in jQuery in just a little bit. Stay tuned.